All right, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well wherever you're watching this. And we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. I am joined by my friend of the stream, Snacks. And we're going to be doing another tier list today. This one's not going to take that long because there isn't that much to rank yet. But we have been watching a show. Well, really, I've only been watching it over the last month, maybe month and a half. He's been watching it since the beginning. But we both really like this show, so we wanted to do a tier maker list of every episode of the show so far. It's only 17 episodes, but what this show is doing is pretty spectacular. It's called Smiling Friends. It's on Adult Swim. The episodes get posted to HBO Max. And I personally think that this show is doing things for adult animation that I haven't seen since the first couple seasons of Archer. Like, Archer, the first two seasons were the thing to me that kind of really showed what adult animation could be if it was written well. And since then, I don't think it's been doing that well. But Smiling Friends really has this stuff figured out in a way that I don't think anything since Archer has. And obviously it's created by Psychic Pebbles and what's the guy's name? Zach Hadel of a YouTube fame. So it's great to see a guy like that have success in the mainstream to this level. And he has also managed to get a lot of internet content creators in YouTube that I happen to like a lot attached to the show. So that's always cool to see. So we're going to be talking about Smiling Friends. So let's go ahead and get into it here. If you haven't watched the show yet, it's not that big of a deal. We are going to be talking about spoilers, but there's like one episode in the entire show that uses a genuine plot twist. And the show is not about like, oh, I didn't see that coming. The show is a comedy. It's an absurdist comedy, and you're not watching it because you're expecting some kind of Usual Suspects type ending. So I wouldn't worry about it too much if you haven't watched the show yet. But let's go ahead and get started here. Our tiers are going to be S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, and F tier. That's usually how I go with these things. A lot of the time, tier lists do not have a D rank, which I think is a mistake. There should be room for an episode or a thing that is bad but not atrocious. I think there is a clear distinction between D and F. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with, this is the pilot here, Desmond's Big Day Out. Originally aired on April 1st of 2020, and then the season was not picked up until January of 2022, which I didn't watch the show back then, but I imagine it must have been agonizing to wait over a year and a half for them to actually continue from one episode being released. But Desmond's Big Day Out, this is, of course, the episode that co-stars Mike Stalaska, I believe his name is, of Red Letter Media fame. He plays the suicidal, quote-unquote, kid. And he is the first client that we get to see of the Smiling Friends. I think that it does a very good job of showing like the basic mission statement of the Smiling Friends as an organization. There's some really good gags in it. And then there's also a B plot, which I love because it might be the only Alan-related B plot in the entire first season, now that I think about it. And I love that character, and I wanted to see more of him. So I think this is a phenomenally strong way to start the show. I think this was one of their best episodes, actually. So when you put all that stuff together, I personally do feel like this is actually probably a top tier episode. I think that it kind of brings everything together. It's got a plot that is in line with the structure of the show. It's got a B plot with Alan. It actually gives Alan something to do, which no other episode of the first season does. The only thing, looking back at it, is Mr. Boss doesn't really get to do anything. He just gives them the mission, and then he's just kind of out of the episode, which is true for a lot of the season 1 episodes, honestly. But do you think this is an S tier episode as well, if you're comparing it to the rest of the show?
Well, for me, as I've said before, this is my favorite episode.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer would obviously be yes. But I disagree with what you said that Mr. Boss didn't have anything to do. He breastfed his son, which is actually really important for the plot. I swear it makes sense if you just watch Rick and Morty. But
yeah, but it has some great gags like the I Love Kids thing, which is, it's a phenomenal way of starting off the show. And beyond just the funny gags in the episode, because there are many, the fact that he holds a revolver to his head for the entire episode is hysterical. And the fact that he's holding it to his head even while he's eating dinner and riding on a roller coaster, it just kind of captures the episode and the entire show perfectly. But it also kind of introduces this whole idea of, like, we are adult animation, and we're not going to be overly optimistic, but we are not going to embrace pessimism the way that a lot of adult animation does.
Okay, I'm listening to myself on the broadcast back. It's heavily delayed for me. But I've got that weird lisp in my microphone again. I'm going to try to...
Oh, okay. No problem. But just to kind of continue to circle around that, what I mean by that is that him kind of embodies extreme optimism. He's always trying to be very positive and sunny about things. And in this episode, we see how much that doesn't work. And by the end of the episode, although he snaps out of it very quickly, he's sent into a existential crisis of some sort, basically. He's basically has his optimism deconstructed by Desmond near the end of the episode, to where he actually starts to question his entire existence, basically.
Yeah.
But
what?
Go ahead.
What I love about this episode that no other episode does is that it actually shows you what happened after to somebody that they helped. Even though it was just a quick little commercial, seeing Desmond, he cleaned himself up and he started a new business. He's happy. You get to see where that went thanks to the influence of Pim and Charlie, as opposed to just, okay, he smiled, our job is done, let's move on.
Right. And the climax of the episode is not, oh, Pim is wrong to be optimistic. Pim is wrong to think he can help people. Everybody who's depressed is right. It's correct to be depressed, and nihilism is correct. The lesson is he was just going about it in a very childish way. A guy is very depressed because of his wife leaving him, his kids leaving him, etc. The way to help that person is not, oh, I'm going to take you to a theme park. The way to help that person is to actually attack the root issue of them feeling like they don't have a purpose in life. So it's not that being optimistic is bad. It's not like some Rick and Morty nihilism thing. It's, no, you just went about it the wrong way. And that kind of sets the tone for the whole show, I think, to where it's not just a, typical adult animated show that embraces nihilism.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For posterity's sake, for future viewers, I don't actually have a lisp. Something wrong with my microphone.
I can barely hear it, dude. It's very subtle on my end. I think it's very, very... I wouldn't worry about it too much.
I don't know. Maybe I need to write an angry letter to Corsair. Who knows? Anyway, yeah. Next episode.
Right, okay. So the next episode is another really strong one. I think it's the Mr. Frog. It's just called Mr. Frog. Basically, the Smiling Friends are helping out a disgraced celebrity who committed an act of violence in public, and they're trying to get him to rehab his image, but he's completely incapable of controlling himself, so he just makes it worse and worse and worse. And then there's that B-plot with Glep, who is being cast as the replacement for Mr. Frog on his TV show. And those two plots come together really well at the end of the episode in ways that are, I think, relatively predictable, but still very entertaining. And I obviously love the Mr. Frog character. Mr. Frog might be the most popular non-recurring character in the entire show, which is why they brought him back in season 2. And I think some of the gags in this episode are brilliant, like the Jimmy Fallon thing. There was a YouTube comment I saw once about the Jimmy Fallon clip in this show. It was basically, this is like a Family Guy cutaway gag, but it's not a cutaway gag. It's actually part of the plot. And that's what I love about it. Like, they do bizarre things like that, but they don't do it as some dumb cutaway gag. They actually have it be part of the episode in a meaningful way. So for me, I think Mr. Frog probably goes into, I would probably put it in A tier. I wouldn't even hate considering it S tier. I think it's really, really good. I love the episodes that do the A plot, B plot balance well. I don't love the executive guy, the TV executive guy, but in many ways his involvement is kind of almost like a parody, where it's like, okay, we have this character that is animated in a very plain and unattractive way, but he's playing the TV executive. Like, he's animated like a Hoops character or a Paradise PD character. And he has the role of an executive who's trying to get a TV show obsessed with appealing to as many people as possible and destroying the creative process in the process, which is probably a joke, something that they actually thought of as they were putting that character together. So, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence here.
Well, I would say that in the show thus far, there are 3 S-ranked episodes, and Mr. Frog is one of them, because I'm rating that on a scale of not just the quality of the episode, but also the sheer impact that it had on the fan base and spreading the word of Smiling Friends. This episode has the largest amount of memes from the whole show that are spread out there on the internet combined. There's plenty that have taken the internet by storm, but Mr. Frog definitely is the most, and some of the most famous, especially the reaction after the Jimmy Fallon bit.
Right.
So it did a lot of work in helping to spread the seed of the show. And what's more important is that it introduced you to another concept of how the show's going to go, which is that in the first episode, they've done a great job of turning Desmond's life around, because even though it was inadvertent, they presented him with the opportunity to find a new purpose in life and move him forward in a very healthy direction. In the Mr. Frog episode, they got him to smile again through something that they were very ethically conflicted about, and they did not think that it was a good thing that just happened. However, they realized that their job was done in a complete success. So it introduced the concept for the show that sometimes they get the job done, and it's not even that they didn't mean to do it, but that they didn't want it to happen that way. And they're very concerned with the way that it ended up unfolding. However, their job is still done. So it shows the viewer that, you don't really know how it is that they're going to end up succeeding. By the episode, they're just going to come up with, something's going to happen, they'll succeed, and then on they go. But it was definitely completely out of left field moment. It was great.
Right. I love the design of Mr. Frog, how he doesn't look like a frog at all. He's just green. I like the, of course, the Jimmy Fallon bit is absolutely remarkable, and the fact that they were able to actually coherently work that into the plot is remarkable as well.
Also, it introduces the extremely important character of Charlie's uncle.
Yeah, true. Very true. I like the implication that they weren't mad at him for trying to eat a TMZ reporter. They were mad at him because he failed. Because when he succeeds to eat the TV executive at the end, they're happy. So the implication being that if he had succeeded to eating the TMZ reporter, everything would have been cool. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm down with S rank totally. Even,
Like I said,
it has a B
there's
plot.
right. In my view, there's only 3 S-ranked episodes. And I put that one. The first 2 episodes are both S-ranked, and then there's one in the second season.
Okay, episode 3, Shrimp's Odyssey. This is an episode where, well, there are a couple things going on here. First, there's a framing device of the audience voting on whether or not a character named Smormu should be added to the Smiling Friends roster. And then the actual plot of the episode is the Smiling Friends have to help a character named Shrimp, who has been dumped by his girlfriend. Pim tries to help get them back together. Charlie tries to help him move on with his life in a healthy way. Neither really has much success. Pim ends up falling for what he believes to be Shrimp's ex-girlfriend and grapples with the morality of him taking what he believes to be Shrimp's ex-girlfriend for himself. Ultimately decides he can't do it, and then realizes at the end that he picked the wrong girl. So this is the one episode that relies on like a plot twist almost. You could call it a plot twist, but I don't think this show is about like, wow, I didn't know the show was going to take me that way. The show is ruined now because somebody told me that Shrimpina was actually not Shrimpina at all. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. So no B plot in this episode unless you count the Smormu thing. The boss shows up for about 10 seconds. I don't think Alan or Glep are in the episode at all. I know the montage of Pim imagining his life with Shrimpina is from The Bicentennial Man, the movie. There's like a very similar montage in that movie. It is kind of the first time in the show's run where I did feel like they were using a little too much time on something. And the fact that there's no B plot is, I think, kind of an issue. I like the episodes that have some kind of a B plot more. Although, the Shmormu stuff is hilarious. I will admit that. So, I think that if you're comparing this episode to other episodes of the show, I do think this is like B tier overall.
Yes, I would say, personally, I think this is A tier. I thought it was a very good episode that had a lot of wonderful gags for it. However, it's not perfect. And I love the resolution, definitely.
Yeah.
And the whole Smormu thing was just an absolute classic. However, I felt that the scenes where Shrimp and Charlie were together could have been better.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, kind of very generic. I did like the Homer Simpson dude coming by and taking a bite out of him.
Yeah.
That was nice. I love at the end when they're just like, dude, his name was Shrimpina. He'd be a shrimp. Like, that's so perfect because it so perfectly
Right.
embodies like defying expectations and then bringing it back to the original expectations.
And plus Pim being so stubborn that he never even asked her name. He just decided, oh, this is the only woman in this building that has to be Shrimpina. Instead of thinking, am I wrong? Here, let me ask her name. He never asked her name at any point.
Yeah, I mean, Shrimp is a short, balding, reclusive gamer with a obviously over the top, comedically idiotic voice. Why would he ever be dating someone like her in any circumstance? Even if they broken up, why were they dating in the first place? You know, it's just like you almost get the sense that he saw her and was so stricken by how beautiful she was, he stopped thinking about everything else.
So I don't have a problem putting it in B tier. I personally feel that it's A tier because what pushes it over for me is that it has the absolute best moment in the series for Pym when he just shouts something.
Mm-hmm.
When he goes, "I believe in destiny," and then he just runs out of the room, and then you still got the guy being curb stomped in the hallway. That was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of another example because it does end with, I will admit, a predictable gag where Jennifer actually likes shrimp and they end up getting together. Like, I think that's pretty predictable, admittedly. But it also ends with, it's not a pessimistic or nihilistic ending. It's just Pym messed up because he wasn't thinking about the situation properly. But that doesn't mean that, you know, everything's going to have a miserable ending. Like when Shrimp says, I'm going to die alone or I'm going to be alone forever, that ends up not being true. So yeah, that's a good episode, but there are some issues with it. Next episode would be a silly Halloween special. This was the first Halloween episode. It's actually extremely simple. Pym has to go into the forest to get firewood, and he ends up going too deep into the forest, gets lost, and then he gets attacked by a forest demon, runs back to the Smiling Friends headquarters. The Smiling Friends partygoers rip apart the forest demon because they think he's wearing blackface. And Pym is scarred. And there's a framing device of a Robert Stack-like host watching the episode on a television in the back of an alley. So it's kind of like a, I guess you could call it kind of like a Treehouse of Horror episode. Now, to be clear, I don't think any episode of this show so far is bad, but if there is one that is bad, I think this is the one that comes the closest, personally. There's just not much to it.
I feel it's the second weakest episode in the first season. Like you said, it's not bad. I very much enjoyed it, but because it was a Halloween episode and they went very far in the Halloween episode thing, it just doesn't feel like it fits with the rest of the series. Um, the moments that weren't about being scary absolutely did though. So that's it's not bad. I'd put it at C. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad or anything. I like Pym's song about picking up twigs. I think that's great. Kind of summarizes him as a character. I love the fact that the forest demon is animated in a genuinely menacing way. I love the fact that this show's willing to mix it up with the animation styles to that degree.
I also liked that they didn't do a predictable thing where it turns out that Pym was just letting his fear get to him, and that he was mistaken, and that it was actually just a misunderstanding the whole time. No, it's actually a forest demon, like an actual eldritch abomination creature that is trying to consume his soul. That.
And the blackface stuff at the end
Right.
is classic, admittedly, right? Like when he gets back to the office and it stops trying to be scary and it starts trying to be funny again. I think that's great. I like that a lot.
And then Charlie's like, "Yeah, this right. That's why I don't dress up for Halloween, man." And also, Alan dressed up as the Joker. That was great too.
Right. Right. And Glep is dressed as Ronald Reagan, which sounds ridiculous, and it is, but it's hilarious. And his girlfriend is dressed as Nancy Reagan. I like the part where Pym is imagining his like wife and kids at the house he finds. And you can really see that the idea of working on a farm in his old age is something that's really important to him because they've done that twice now. They did it with his Shrimpina dream, and they did it here. Like, that's actually something with that character that seems very firm now. Even though this is an absurdist comedy, there are things about Pym that seem consistent. Okay.
Right.
So yeah, C tier. It's one of the weaker episodes of the show so far, just because there's not much to it. And the framing device of the host walking in an alleyway, that's a trope that I think is kind of dull. The host of the horror episode. And I know they're kind of making fun of it, but I didn't find it that interesting. Okay. Next episode is Who Violently Murdered Simon S. Salty? So, this episode, Tim and Charlie go get dinner at a fast food restaurant. They find the owner and founder of the restaurant, Simon S. Salty, dead in the back room, and they realize that one of the mascots must have done it. So they interview the mascots, try to figure out who did it, end up finding a videotape of the murder, and it turns out that everybody tried to murder him, but he actually died of a heart attack. And that's basically the episode. So, on the one hand, there's no B-plot, no appearance of Alan or Glep or Mr. Boss. But I think the A-plot is very strong here. I think the Simon S. Salty stuff is great. I love the design of the mascots. I love the way it kind of turned into a murder mystery. So it's Pim and Charlie working together to do something, but it's twisted slightly to be a murder mystery instead of trying to make someone smile. I think that was a really good idea. And I love the ultimate resolution of the episode as well. So I think this is a really strong episode. Even though it doesn't have a lot of the things that I like, I would still probably put it in like A, maybe B.
This is going to end up being the first episode that we really disagree on. To me, this is the weakest episode of the first season. It's the only one that if I had to call any episode of the entire series boring, I would say is boring. While I don't feel that it actually is boring, I'm like, it would definitely be there for me. I have to give it credit, though, because there are a lot of excellent moments, a lot of great callbacks to the Oni Plays origin of all the people who made the show. But what is definitely highest here for this episode to me is that it has the best after credits segment of any of the episodes in the series where they bury the century egg. Because first of all, it's extraordinary that Charlie actually kept his word, because when he promises the guy, he's like, yeah, we will definitely do that for you after you die, bro.
Right.
Like, it sounds like Charlie's just being sarcastic to tell him whatever he wants to hear so that they can move on. But then Charlie fucking keeps his word. They actually go all the way to China to bury him. And the moment they finish burying him and he's in the ground, Pim says he's never had a century egg. So Charlie digs him up so they can eat his corpse, which is just fucking hysterical. They go all that way to China just to keep his word, and they're like, okay, we'll just eat his corpse anyway. But I say we could split the difference and put it in B tier, but for me personally, I feel this is the weakest episode of the first season. And if I had to call any episode of the series boring, while I don't feel it's boring, I would say it's sort of like, if you could imagine, this episode has really high peaks, but then spends a lot of time in a valley for me. So I'd say we could split the difference and put it in B.
Well, I kind of put it in B. If you want to put it in D, we could split the difference and say C. I'm not against that.
Yeah, C's where I think it should go. I definitely don't think that there's any episode of the series that should go into F.
Right. I totally agree.
I could think of one other episode besides this one that would fit in D. While there are great moments there, I'm like, Yeah.
I love the design of the Crazy Cup, by the way. I think that's brilliant, the way they animated that, because there are so many generic ways. You could have done it like Master Shake, but they found a completely different way to animate an anthropomorphic, I probably mispronounced that, anthropomorphic drinking cup. I love that.
Right. And also that he's wearing a costume. His body is literally shaped like that.
When they show that, it's fucking terrifying, but it's amazing at the same time.
That was great, because he's the only member of the mascot group that isn't actually what he's being portrayed as. You know, like that ketchup thing is actually a ketchup packet. They were actually the salt and the pepper, the weird Spanish eye things or whatever. They were actually whatever they were. The century egg obviously was a century egg. He was the only person who was like a weird looking creature who was wearing a costume.
All right. So
was.
next we had Enchanted Forest, which is an episode that is obviously an homage to a lot of things that I'm guessing Zach and Michael like a lot, which is something that all creators do when they create TV shows
Yeah,
like this.
they love the animated Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
They love it.
So him and Charlie go on a mission to help the Princess of the Enchanted Forest smile for a portrait. So they go into the Enchanted Forest. Pym is very excited. Charlie is not. He's actually kind of uninterested. They get waylaid by a witch. They get saved by basically a hobbit. It's not a literal hobbit. They don't ever call it a hobbit, but it's a hobbit. Let's be real here. And they end up going on a journey with him, and Charlie ends up getting really into the quests that you can do in the forest and becomes a conquering hero. And Pym becomes very, very jealous because he is continually shut out of these proceedings. And by the end of the episode, he's basically turned into Gollum. And the Hobbit ends up getting killed when they're having an argument. And he has a gift he wants to give to the princess. So they get to the princess, give her Pym the Hobbit's gift. And it turns out that the Hobbit was stalking the princess and was trying to give her a bomb, which is actually a reference that I really like to the story of the Bajork stalker, Ricardo Lopez, who this is actually a real life thing. This is a pretty well-known story, but just to kind of sum it up real quick, there was some guy, I think he was like a bug exterminator who lived in Georgia, who was obsessed with a Icelandic singer named Bjork and wanted to basically be with her. And then I think he found out she was dating somebody, and she decided, well, okay, I'm going to kill her, and then I'm going to kill myself, and we'll be together in the afterlife. So he mailed her a bomb, didn't get to her. So basically, his story is a mirror for the story of Ricardo Lopez. And the fact that her stalker is dead makes her smile. And end episode. I would probably put this one in A. I think this is a really good one. No B plot and no involvement of Alan really other than like the first 15 seconds. But I think what's in here is really, really fun.
Yes, I'm kind of shocked that we don't have one of these episodes in A yet, but this is definitely an A tier episode. Lot of tremendous moments. Pym's transformation into the Gollum creature, it turning out that Mip, even though he was very helpful, was actually the villain the whole time.
Right.
The hilarity of the fucking witch thing. It's the entire sequence of the witch is probably one of my favorite gags in the entire series. From when the hilariously rigged game that starts like, there's no way that she can be allowed to do that. Is she allowed to do that? And then drag him away. Oh, we were right there, man. And then her cutting up the onion. Yeah, she's good. And then Mip shows up with a cross. And he's like, away with you, you foul, rotten thing. And then she flies off in terror.
Yeah.
That whole thing was just tremendous.
I will admit there's something about the way Mip is animated that makes me uncomfortable to look at. Like, I mean, obviously he's supposed to be ugly because it's imitating an art style that made the Hobbits pretty ugly. But there's something a little unsettling about looking at that to me. But other than that, I think this episode, for an episode with no B plot whatsoever, is excellent. I love Mip's song. And Pym was there too, I guess, but Charlie was the main... It's so on the nose, but it's great.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So yeah, I think that's A tier. Okay, episode 7 is Frowning Friends. Basically, a business or a chair, I don't know if they're a business or charity, opens up across the street from the Smiling Friends, basically trying to do the opposite of the Smiling Friends, where they make people upset, and they try to promote nihilism. So you could almost call this episode like kind of a take that to the typical modern adult animated show, like BoJack, like Rick and Morty. So these guys who kind of look like Pym and Charlie go around making people upset. They get the whole town wrapped up in their nihilism. And Mr. Boss ends up going through a psychotic breakdown and wants to kill the Frowning Friends because they've tanked his business. And this ends up revealing that the Frowning Friends are not nihilists at all, because they reveal that they don't want to die, and it looks like everything is good, and then the episode ends in a really hard to predict and really, I'd say, hilarious manner. So I like pretty much everything in this episode, except during like the peak of Grimm managing to get the whole town enthusiastic about his nihilism. I do think that's a little bit corny, because I don't think you can really get enthusiastic about being a nihilist like that. Like, you wouldn't hold a rally and try to get a bunch of people really excited about deciding you don't believe in anything. But other than that, I think this episode has some of the best gags of the entire show so far.
Yeah, I would say it is a very strong B.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of flaws,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, a lot of really, really good strengths. The DJ Spit thing is fucking phenomenal. Yeah, I'd have it probably ranked ahead of Shrimp, unless you were doing, instead of like a ranking thing, it's just in the order that we were putting stuff up. But when I say that it's in B tier, I would have it ahead of the Shrimp episode. But the person that they were actually trying to help out, the weird alien thing, that
Mr.
was like the
Man?
weakest.
Mr. Man?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the weakest of them trying to help anybody out. The Ronald Reagan impression was fucking phenomenal. The DJ Spit thing was phenomenal. The boss having a psychotic break was phenomenal. And Glepp and Allen working for the police, that was great.
Mm-hmm.
And the Renaissance Men ending, and
Yeah, that's fucking brilliant. And, like, they break the fourth wall when it happens in a way that's completely not obnoxious, when Charlie's like, I told you about it at the start. And he means start of the episode. I read a little bit about the Mr. Man thing, where his head turns into DJ Spit. And basically they said they did not know how to end that scene in a way that was funny. So they just came up with something really stupid. Which, okay, I can appreciate that, but it feels like a Family Guy bit.
Yeah. DJ Spit, one of the best characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole sequence was great, but I agree with you. The resolution of the episode felt super fucking bad. It was like you said, where they have the Grimm getting the steady to choose being unhappy for whatever reason, then him crying when the boss was about to shoot him, and just like all that was
it, like, again,
not executed well.
I know that it's absurdist. I know it's an absurdist show. I get that totally, but I don't think you could hold a rally and get people really excited about being a nihilist. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
They could maybe do that in Germany.
Maybe. All right, so yeah, B tier for Frowning Friends. The fucking hallucinations the boss has are great, though. That is a phenomenal gag, even though it only lasts 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, Dak flexing the greatest Reagan impression of all time.
Episode 8, Charlie dies and doesn't come back. It's the Christmas episode for season 1, where, excuse me, him and Charlie get into a fight about Charlie being pessimistic about things and not being enthusiastic enough about stuff. They go out to get a Christmas tree for the Smiling Friends headquarters, and Charlie gets brutally mauled to death by the tree that he cuts down and goes to hell and finds out that the devil is, or Satan, I guess I should say, is depressed, so he decides to go help him. And he's not really able to do so, but he pisses off Satan enough to where he decides he's going to torture Charlie, which makes Satan happy, so he technically does help him, and then God has to show up to save Charlie and bring him back to life. And the whole thing is in a framing device of Glep as an old man telling his grandson a story about Christmas. So I feel like the middle of the episode kind of valleys pretty hard, but the good stuff in this episode is quite good. So I think that it's kind of a middling episode as far as the series goes. Somewhere in the middle for me.
I love it, plus it's the last thing Gilbert Gottfried was ever a part of, so A.
Okay, so I would go
That's
B, A, so let's go ahead and put it in A. I feel like that little musical bit they do when Charlie's walking to go meet with Satan, like that feels a little fillery to me. And in a show where the episodes are only 11 minutes long, any kind of filler at all can be kind of rough. It feels like 2 minutes of an 11-minute episode get eaten up by that segment, and I wasn't crazy about that.
Fair enough, but still, I loved that episode. Just
I like
so much of it was just so good.
the mirror of Charlie playing Rust in the opening scene, and then Satan's playing Rust. And Rust is a great game to use for this kind of thing because of how toxic the player base is. Like, that is a game you play when you want to be fucking depressed.
I really liked how they had the foreign guy was door dashing the food to Satan,
Mm-hmm.
and his order was wrong, and the foreign guy said "Happy Holidays" while he's literally in hell, delivering to the Prince of Darkness.
And then Satan gets mad about it. He's like, "Merry Christmas!"
Yeah, that was truly phenomenal.
Yeah. And fun little trivia fact. I know you know this, but James Rolfe had the opportunity to voice Satan, but he ended up saying, "I can't do it. I don't have time," which is a huge missed opportunity at this point, I think. And yeah, Gilbert Gottfried. I like this segment at the end with Glep where he's like, "Christians were right the whole time. I'm sorry." It's a great way to end that sequence. All right. Okay, so that would be the last real episode of Season 1, but there was one more episode of Season 1 titled The Smiling Friends Go to Brazil. And this episode's a joke episode, basically. It was made for a gag where they were like, "Oh, you want another episode? Okay, here's another episode, but it's a stupid episode where nothing really happens." Smiling Friends are going to go on vacation to Brazil. They get there. They realize Pim didn't book the hotel. So they get on the phone, try to figure out the solutions, and ultimately they decide to just go back to America, or Pennsylvania, I guess is where they live. And they don't get to have their vacation, and that's literally it. So this one's kind of hard for me to really evaluate because there's really nothing much to the episode. But it still has funny moments, some funny exchanges, and it's supposed to be stupid. So it's always hard for me to evaluate episodes like this.
Well, you're right. It's supposed to be stupid. It was a joke episode. It was never supposed to be made in the first place, and it was good and everything, but you still got to evaluate it as an episode of the series. Because people who didn't have that kind of context would watch the episode and be like, what the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Got to put it in D tier.
Yeah, I think I agree. I like the gag with the Brazilian guy trying to rip them off, and he's really, really bad at it. That's good. I like the phone call with the boss.
And I don't know if you noticed when that weird Brazilian guy came up, but he reaches into his pocket at one point and then pulls something out really quickly, and Charlie actually flinches. Like,
yeah, and he even talks about that right after he's gone. He's like, "Dude, I thought he was going to pull something out of his pocket." Like, I do think it's commendable that they're able to do an episode where nothing happens. It's kind of like the Chinese restaurant episode of Seinfeld, or the parking garage episode of Seinfeld. But the issue is Seinfeld was a sitcom. This is an absurdist comedy. So it's just not going to be as interesting to watch these characters literally do nothing but argue in an airport. But I guess it's better than having no episode at all. Like, they didn't have to do this episode. They did it as a joke. So I don't mind it existing. And they did do some impressive things with it, but it's pretty dumb overall. All right, so let's just go ahead and move right past that one and go into Season 2, which finished up last week. Only 8 episodes on this one, because they haven't done a joke episode yet, and they may or may not. First episode of Season 2 is titled Gwimbly Definitive Remastered Enhanced Extended Edition with DX 4K Anniversary Director's Cut. And this is a very fun episode, especially if you grew up playing platformers. The Smiling Friends run into a down-on-his-luck Gwimbly, who is a character who's basically, in the Smiling Friends universe, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, Banjo-Kazooie. He was once the star of very popular platforming games, but his studio kind of kicked him to the side when platformers fell out of style in favor of first-person shooters and more violent games. So they try to help him get a new game with his old studio, then they try to help him get his own game independently. Meanwhile, the CEO of the company that used to make Gwimbly's games doesn't want to allow him to do anything new because it's his IP, and he feels like it's his right to not do anything with it if he doesn't want to. And then there's a B-plot with Charlie being forced to help basically a jackass named James, a complete jerk-off. And these two plots end up coming together where James kills the CEO, leaving the new mascot of the company, Troglor, with nothing to do. So him and Gwimbly decide to team up together and go be in a Smash Brothers type game. So as a gamer myself, somebody who plays a lot of games and understands what the Gwimbly game is kind of mirroring or aping, I had a lot of fun with this one. I watched this one a lot, like in the background when I'm playing a game or something. I really like this one. Offhand,
Yeah, I enjoyed it too.
I think I'd put it in
Go
A.
ahead.
I think I'd put it in A.
I would put it in A also.
Yeah. The gag at the end is, of course, legendary. The oogly goo bit. I love how it doesn't really make any sense unless you really, really know things like Smash Brothers, and then you can actually put together that he's wave dashing. But if you are not like a Smash Brothers nerd, you're never going to know that. I like the way the two plots weave together at the end. There's so many little gags here, like him being on Cameo and trying to earn money by doing requests for his viewers. There's so many little sequences in this game, in this episode, like the Alan bit in the lobby when he kicks the little secretary.
Yeah, I love that. It's one of my favorite moments in the whole series.
And the fact that they gave Alan something to do, they gave Mr. Boss something to do technically, even if he doesn't show up until the end. So I think this is a really strong episode. I will say James might be a little too detestable at times, but for the most part, I think they still pull that off really well. So yeah, that's an A-tier episode for me.
I thought he was exceptionally well animated, and I didn't have any kind of problem with James because I knew that he was there just to have Charlie just get fucking bullied, which was hilarious.
All right. Second episode of season 2 is called Mr. President. Pim and Charlie need to go help the president cheer up and smile. The president is a complete moron who is only serving as president because he was the VP to a clearly much better president who died. He's completely inept, completely incompetent, and he's currently expected to get crushed in the election, first by Squiggly Miggly, then Mr. Frog enters the race and runs against him, and eventually it becomes a two-man race between Mr. Frog and the current president. And they're trying to help him get reelected, but he's completely incapable of doing anything even remotely competent. There's no real B plot in the episode unless you count like the worm conspiracy where worms actually rule the government and they're trying to manipulate everything to make Mr. Frog win. And then they decide, oh, we need to actually help Jimbles win because Mr. Frog eats worms. And everything kind of comes to a head on election night. This has maybe become my favorite episode in the series so far. There are so... Every minute, it feels like there's another brilliant gag. And I love the character of Jimbles. I love bringing back Mr. Frog. I think this might be my favorite episode in the series.
I definitely like when they ate the or when Mr. Frog ate the baby. It's not what I would say is the third S-ranked episode of this of the series, and the one from this season. I would personally say A, but it was really good. And the reason that I call it A, even though it's a very, very well done episode, and that this is their intention. The Jimbo character was just too gross to look at because he was a real guy and was so dirty all the time. And it kind of distracts me when I'm watching because I'm like, ugh, like I just feel physically ill when I see him.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I take the point off. But of course, that was intentional. Like, I get it, but I'm just like, bleh.
Yeah. I love how during the debate, he just straight up calls himself the R word. And that's supposed to be like an inspirational moment. I love the biased moderators during the debate. I love the ending with Glep and Mr. Boss getting, oh, well, whatever I do now is on Glep.
Yeah, that was tremendous. There's definitely a lot to love about this episode. Dude, check the news. It doesn't matter what channel.
Yeah, that is absolutely brilliant. One of the best lines, "I'll take matters into my own hands," is brilliant.
Mr. Frog, why are you so evil? You have 1 second to answer. Hello. Wrong.
Time's up, plus you're wrong.
That was great.
Okay. So, third episode. This was my favorite episode for a while. I'm not sure if it is now, but I still love it. A Alan Adventure. Basically, Mr. Boss tells Alan, go get more paper clips for the office, and he ends up going on a really convoluted and complicated journey to try to get paper clips, and he ends up not able to get them because his landlord conspired to buy out all the paper clips in town to force Alan to hang out with him, and Alan ends up having to disarm a bomb that his landlord set up so he can get the paper clips to Mr. Boss, which sounds like it would be a pretty bad episode, I think, on the surface of it. But I love the fact that they gave Alan an extended period of time to show his character and actually do things and not just be a weirdo. Like, in this episode, for the most part, he's the straight man. Whereas in The Office, he's not really the straight man, and maybe in terms of tone, but in terms of the way that he acts, I don't consider him to be much of a straight man at all because his mannerisms are so weird. So giving him his own adventure to go on, I think was great. I'm glad they finally did it. And I think the stuff he goes through is a ton of fun. So I'd go like probably A. I can't go S because it doesn't have a B plot. And it doesn't really give several characters anything to do. Like, there's no Glep, very little Charlie, very little Pim. I'd put it in A.
For me, this was the third S-ranked episode of the series, and I say that because this episode is flawless. Just a simple premise of it's just an Alan episode, and it's executed perfectly. All of this to deliver you right into the palm of my hand.
I love the landlord. The landlord is amazing. DJ Spit makes his triumphant return.
And almost certainly the last time we'll see him, too.
Well, Mr. Landlord did say that it was all paid actors and animatronics, so maybe it was like a staged or something, you know?
Well,
But the office crap thing with the Armzo, the 6-armed shelf stacker is phenomenal. Like, to me, I know that is kind of a nothing sequence for a lot of people. It's just like a minute of Alan and some dude arguing. But that's one of the funniest parts of any episode to me so far. I like how this dude just has 6 arms and nobody really thinks that's all weird. I like how his manager runs up and is like, "Why'd you stop stacking with your 6 arms?" Like he needs to call attention to the fact that he has 6 arms.
This entire episode is just so perfect in terms of the little touches of the background animation and the consistency and intelligence with how they put everything together. Like the Armzo sequence is great. You know, like the manager, he can hear the argument, so you see him in the background. He's looking around, and then he sees Alan looking all pissed off. So then he runs in, and during that argument, you can see his Armzo's all pissed off. He reacts instantly to Alan calling him an asshole, where suddenly, you know, his eyes get all big. And after the landlord kills himself, the sequence where Alan actually leaves, he steps only half in the puddle of blood with his left foot. So as he's doing his walking animation, you can see that half of his left foot that stepped in the puddle actually has blood on it, and he leaves tiny little footprints only on the left side, and it's tiny because it was only half his foot. And I'm like, that is extraordinary attention to detail.
Absolutely. I hope the landlord comes back, by the way.
Yeah. Between how high effort that episode was and that it was completely flawless, that's why I think it's F.
Yeah, I'm not against
so many. Yeah, there's just so many excellent gags in the episode that they're thrown at you rapid fire so that you can just like enjoy them and just like fucking die. Like you know, Alan, as he begins his morning, you know, there's a naked woman in his bed. She goes, "Alan, last night was so amazing." He just goes, "Okay," and then leaves. Or at the very end, when the reward for all of his hard work is the boss hands him a little miniature version of the boss. He's like, "It's me, Alan. It's a little version of me." And Alan's like, "I don't want this," and then it just devastates the boss. So then Charlie's like, "I'll take it," and then Alan hands it off to him. But then after he's already done it, he's like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that." So he talks to the boss. He's like, I mean, if it's okay with you, boss." And he's like, you already gave it to him." Like,
yeah. I think my favorite mini gag in that episode, other than the landlord, is the, "By the way, I'm not a flashback. I actually died." Because it's so unexpected.
Oh, yeah.
It's just...
Oh, man.
Like, if he did die, why is he appearing as a ghost for Alan, a guy he met for, like, 30 seconds on the last day he was alive? It's so good. "By the way, I'm not a flashback. I actually died."
Well, time to go back to hell now. Yeah, it was a tremendous episode. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm not against putting it in S, but I think there's some stuff that isn't in the episode.
Yeah, and the rating system that you used for it is fair. You know, I don't have a problem with it being an A either. But to me, that's the 3 S ranks of the series, are the first 2 episodes and the Alan episode.
Okay, episode 4 of season 2 is the Boss Finds Love. The boss Mr. Boss, I should say, gets married to a malformed demon named Brittany, and she completely, by basically brainwashing the boss, completely changes the way in which the company Smiling Friends functions, and it becomes clear soon that her job is to take the boss's soul and absorb the Smiling Friends business for the benefit of her father, who is Satan. So the Smiling Friends have to come together to figure out a way to stop her. So I'm not a huge fan of the way Brittany is animated, because I find it to be so ugly. Like, and obviously that's kind of the point, but it's so ugly, I don't really like looking at it very much. I do really, really like how the Smiling Friends team up off the clock to accomplish something. I think that's a great idea. I would love to see more of that. Like, all 3 of them working together like that. I think that's great. So I'm kind of torn on this one between A or B. I'm having a tough time with that one. A or B.
I would be fine with either. Me personally, I say A, but on the lower end of A. I don't like all the different jump scares that are in the episode, but of course that is the entire point. It's the Halloween episode. Like, I get it. But, you know, and that's my complaint in much the same way that you didn't like the way Boss's wife was animated because she was too ugly, even though, again, that was the point. But this episode does have my two favorite visual gags of the entire series. The first is the one I was telling you about that you didn't notice, where Charlie's drunk at the wedding, and he's got a piss stain that just slowly grows bigger as he's talking to Pim, because Charlie is so drunk that he's just actively pissing himself while he's talking to Pim and Jumbo and the knife. And then just the entire sequence of Charlie dressed up like Van Helsing when they were going to go kill the bosses. That had me in tears for so long.
Yeah, and nobody comments on it. It's just like he's dressed as Van Helsing. That's normal. No one ever says anything about it.
Right, like you can almost envision the conversation that happened when Charlie and Pim met up, and Pim was like, "Oh, that's actually really smart. I wish I had an outfit like that."
I think that the post-credit scene bumps it up to an A for me, so I'll put it in A too. That is
the second best post-credit scene in the series, definitely.
Your property starts at the post, dude. It's so good.
This is my quarter of hell.
I don't know what else they could have done, but I don't really like the climax of the episode where Brittany just kills herself because she's sad that people think she's evil. Like, I feel like that's kind of a cop-out because they couldn't think of anything else. Personally.
Yeah, I mean, like, Alan's a total badass. Why doesn't he just, like, show up out of nowhere? Like, I kept expecting him to come back and do that. But then they're just like, well, I guess Alan's the badass of the group for some reason.
Yeah, I did really like the Doug Walker gag, the Demon Slayer.
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
That was extraordinary comedic timing when Pim is in despair. He's like, oh no, they removed the page. Now we'll never figure out how to slay the demon. Yo, bro, I just found out how to slay the demon on YouTube.
All right. Episode 5 of Season 2 is called Brother's Egg. Him and Charlie have to go help a aspiring mad scientist named Professor Psychotic create a living homunculus. And it turns out that he's actually kind of a loser who lives with his brother. And they have a lot of disagreements. They don't like each other very much. They get into a lot of arguments. So they try to help repair the relationship between the two, while also trying to help Professor Psychotic get off his obsession with creating a homunculus. And at the end of the episode, he actually manages to successfully create a homunculus, which resolves the brothers fighting, and the episode ends in that way. So, this episode does have some really good gags. I like the depiction of the brothers' relationship a lot. I think the ending is a little bit weak, personally. So, I kind of feel like this is probably B tier, but I could be talked into A as well.
I'd say it's a solid B. What I really enjoyed was the restaurant. I hope they do more with that restaurant in the future. I love it as a concept. It was hilarious. And this is the first episode in a long time where they actually helped somebody.
Absolutely. Even if the ultimate resolution of them arguing was, you know, obviously something that they were trying to prevent. They were trying to get Professor Psychotic to stop trying to create a homunculus, and him creating one completely wipes out. I love the Doug character. I love the way they animated him using rotoscoping with Joel Haver. I think that's brilliant. I think their arguments are great. I love how he's wearing, like, slides when he's working at his construction job. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And when they show him working, he's literally just banging a hammer on a plank of wood. I like that. Yeah. And of course, you know, the best gag of the episode, I think, is the Jared Fogle thing. That's like something that Norm Macdonald would have written if he was still around.
Yeah, not just that, but also the boss with his dog face thing. That was.
Yeah, they bring it back at the end of the episode in a way that I think is brilliant. So I think that's a B tier episode.
Yeah, solid B.
All right, episode 6 of season 2, Charlie, Pim, and Bill versus the alien. Pim takes Charlie to a UFO sighting group, basically a couple of friends that he has who are basically sit around at night trying to spot UFOs. And Charlie inadvertently summons an actual UFO. Him and Pim and Bill get kidnapped. Bill gets murdered. And they end up at an alien party. Basically, it's like an alien frat house party almost, where they end up having to party with the aliens in a bunch of very crazy and over-the-top ways. And they eventually end up making their way back home from that after that situation ends up kind of ending poorly. And when they get back, they discover that the Earth is flat. So this episode doesn't have any Glep or Alan or Mr. Boss or Smiling Friend stuff at all. It almost feels like a spin-off episode more than anything else. I don't find the alien stuff super interesting. There are definitely some good gags, but I didn't find the alien stuff all that compelling. I do like that they're voiced by the Red Letter Media guys. I appreciate that. I did really like the gag at the end of the episode with the Earth being flat. That was fantastic, of course. But I don't know. I didn't like this one as much as a lot of people seem to personally.
Yeah, I agree there. This is without a doubt the weakest episode of the second season. I would say C.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good episode because again, there's no bad episode of the show.
Right.
You know, for those of you who are watching to want to consider this also something of a review, go watch it and watch it right now. This entire series is an excellent use of your time. It's tremendous, very entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And this episode was good too and had a lot of great and wonderful moments, but it's by far the weakest episode of the second season.
Yeah, I feel like its purpose was ultimately to like allow the animators to really go crazy with that episode when that sequence when Pim and Charlie are partying. And there's some cool animation stuff there. It's fun, but it's not very funny. And this is an absurdist comedy at the end of the day.
Right. I also really like how like a lot of, because there's a bunch of overlap right now because they air on the same network of Rick and Morty fans and Smiling Friends fans. They've got all the Rick and Morty fans who are trying to cope really hard that Charlie's actually not religious. So then just as a middle finger to them, because again, they envision Charlie as being Catholic because Charlie is basically Zach in animated form.
Right.
He ended up when the aliens were coming at him and they thought they were about to die like Bill. Charlie started doing the Lord's Prayer, which is fantastic because they're like, he's not religious, and that's
well, it's been pretty obvious for a while. In the Salty S. Simon episode, he refers to murder as violating the sixth commandment. He wears a cross on his neck. Like,
yeah, he's got the cross necklace around his neck, which is fine in the sense of like, plenty of people who really aren't good at being Christian do that kind of thing, almost as if they think that, doing that alone is, enough. So you could do that kind of thing. He's not really religious, but you've got that plus the Van Helsing outfit where he was covered in crucifixes, plus he literally died and went to hell and was saved by God.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And revived, brought back to life. So, like, after seeing all that kind of shit, you kind of, especially when old man Glep, Grandpa Glep, as he's talking to his grandson at the end of the episode, he says, "And Christianity was right all along." It's like if the whole group is Christian, especially after that experience, you kind of, Charlie's not just pretending, guys. Yeah. So I enjoyed that, but definitely the weakest episode of the season, especially the drug trip scene, almost felt like it was there just to cater to more mainstream audiences who love that kind of thing, but it was Probably the most dissatisfying portion of any episode of the series so far, that scene.
Yeah, it's like, for the most part, I think Smiling Friends does a very good job of not wasting your time the way that a show like Family Guy will. Like, I'm sure you're familiar with Family Guy going to random cutaways that take several minutes of, like, mariachi band.
Or Conway Twitty, the famous one.
Yeah.
I remember because when they started doing that Conway Twitty thing, that's when I stopped watching. And it's because by that point Seth had checked out because he felt that the show should have ended and Fox wanted it to keep going because they were making money hand over fist. And Seth was like, well, I want to do new stuff now because, like, I want to keep making money too, but I want to move on from this project and do other things. So because he was still the head writer, he was like, well, I'll just pad this out, and if this doesn't hurt the ratings, then he intended it to hurt the ratings, and then Fox would be like, okay, we'll just end the show, but it didn't hurt the ratings, so it's like, okay, then I have the easiest job in the world then, that I can just put this in every fucking episode and do this shit.
So Smiling Friends doesn't often waste your time, but that drug trip sequence, I feel like, is one of the closest that they've come to it so far. Where it's like, oh, we have an 8-minute episode, we need 11 minutes, let's just put this in there.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like, they do have a very strange sense of humor where crazy stuff will happen. You know, there's one of my favorite bits in Only Plays Ever is Zach starts talking about, he's like, I had this weird thought the other day. What would you do if you were like, you had a girlfriend and she was your girlfriend for a long time, you're in a committed relationship and you really love her, you really care about her, and you're having sex with her, and then you just go, oh God, I'm gonna come. And then when you do that, like Men in Black, where they had the little aliens living inside like the human mech suit and they pilot it from inside the head, what if her head just opened up like that and you see that little alien and then it turns around and it goes, heh, and it just wants you to come in its mouth. Like, if that is the life form that you fell in love with, would you do it in the moment, or would you be like, whoa, bro, what the fuck? And like, as he describes that whole thing, everyone there is like, Zach, do you need help? Like, should we call somebody? Like, it's one of the most hilarious moments though, because it like, again, that's their humor, that it. And then you start mentally envisioning it. You're like, bro, what the fuck? If they put that into an episode, I wouldn't have a problem with that because I know that that's what their humor's like. But again, that drug trip sequence just felt like they put that in there to cater to, lowest common denominator, Norm Groyd. That's Rick and Morty's fan base who is checking into the show. That's what they want to see. So that's what it felt like, was throwing them a bone, which I did not appreciate.
All right.
And that's all I have to say about that episode.
Okay, episode 7 of season 2 is The Magical Red Jewel, aka Tyler Gets Fired. So, kind of the one-off gag of this episode is that there's an off-screen member of the Smiling Friends named Tyler that we've never seen before who gets fired at the start of this episode, which upsets everyone else tremendously. I find it funny that Mr. Boss is a billionaire and this is like a charity, but he still has to fire people for some reason. And apparently Smiling Friends is worth like tens of billions of dollars and only has 5 employees, and yet he still has to fire somebody. I think that's pretty funny.
Not only that, but being the 5th Smiling Friend is cursed, because every episode you show up in, you're never seen again after that. Right. Yeah, the 5th Smiling Friend, Smormu, Jumbo, and then Tyler. And then... Being the 5th Smiling Friend sucks.
All right, so the A plot is that Mr. Boss and Pim go to a place called Spamtopia to buy a magical red jewel, and the B plot is that Alan and Charlie have to watch, basically babysit Jason, the boss's 18-year-old son, who is basically a caterpillar. And in Spamtopia, Mr. Boss and Mr. Boss and Pim try to buy the jewel, but they end up breaking the one sacred rule of Spamtopia, which is don't look at people in the eye. So they're about to be executed, only to find out at the last second that the king of Spamtopia is Pim's former pen pal, so he lets them go and gives them the jewel. Meanwhile, back at Smiling Friends, Alan and Charlie end up watching Jason suddenly just up and die out of nowhere, and they can't revive him. But when the boss comes back, he's able to revive Jason with his red jewel. And then he starts poisoning everybody in the Smiling Friends with some magical dust. And end of episode. So I like it. I think it's pretty good as an episode. I don't know if there's a ton that really stands out really well about it to me. Like, I like how chaotic Spamtopia is animated. It reminds me of, like, Baldi's Basics. But it's not especially funny, I don't think. I don't think some of the gags they did in Spamtopia were all that, like, entertaining. I like the discussions with Alan and Charlie a lot when they're trying to babysit Jason, so I don't know. I think this one kind of lands in the middle for me. I think it's just like a B-ish episode.
Yeah, I also think that this is a B, because like you said, it's like it's pretty forgettable as a Smiling Friends episode. It's not bad by any stretch, but you're just like, you know. But my favorite gag of this episode was when they're in the restaurant and Pim is trying to get his order with the waitress, and then the waitress just fucking vanishes. And he's like, "Oh, did she leave to go get it, or is she even gonna come back?" And then she actually does come back, where later on she's trying to kill Pim at the end of the episode. And he's begging the boss to go faster. I'm like, that was great. That was a great time to bring her back, where she just, for whatever reason, she was just so pissed off that Pim would have the audacity to order what he ordered in that restaurant. Now she wants to fucking kill him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do like that scene where Spamtopia breaks down after Oscars revokes all the rules. I do like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like the stuff with it's cool they brought Jason back, but I don't think they did anything stellar with him. It was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I really hope they bring back the boss's manifesto, though. I want to know more about that. Like, that was a good gag, but I hope they bring that back.
John's like, Mr. Boss, we really got to talk about some of the stuff that you wrote in there. He's like, I can't hear you over the dust.
Right. All right. So, one last episode, the most recent episode aired last week, titled Pim Finally Turns Green, which is not what happens in the episode. Pim ends up bringing an extremely ugly snowman to life by accident and teaches him about life, and then kind of inadvertently teaches him about death, which makes him freak out. So they try to find a way to adequately explain the concept of death to him in a way that won't terrify him. When they fail to do that, they try to come up with a way for him to live forever. And then he kind of on his own comes to terms with the idea of death. And at the end of the episode ends up dying, and he's okay with it. And then he comes back as the ocean when he melts. And yeah, that's the end of it, basically. So notably, the snowman is voiced by Dana Snyder, who voiced Gazpacho in... He voiced Gazpacho and Master Shake.
And many other roles in many other shows. He's a pretty storied voice actor among Cartoon Network, because again, that's what Adult Swim is part of, is Cartoon Network. And Chowder aired on Cartoon Network, so you can find his voice in a lot of different shows. He's been with Cartoon Network for decades. So having him in here, was like, hey, they're really taking Smiling Friends very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
This episode was my favorite of the season, even though I said that the Alan episode was an S rank and was flawless.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed this one even more than that, because I just love how upbeat everyone is. I love everything that Charlie does in this episode. Absolutely everything that he does is perfect to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole sequence with the Yeti was just fucking perfect.
Yeah. I love the Bill Nye bit. I think the Bill Nye bit is brilliant. Like, it could so easily fall into, like, the Family Guy trap of being stupid, like a dumb Family Guy skit, but they actually make it part of the plot. And to have him show up, and he looks like Bill Nye, but he doesn't sound like Bill Nye. He's not acting like Bill Nye. He's not performing a duty that you would expect Bill Nye to need to do. And then they just immediately kill him off. I thought that was hilarious. I like the fact that they had a very realistic electrocution scene for him, which is it shows that Michael and Zach had probably watched a lot of gore videos in their day. I'm just going to say it. For them to get the electrocution scene that realistic looking. And I mostly like the way the episode ends, even if it's a little bit corny. So yeah, I would put that in A pretty happily.
I would also definitely. It was tremendous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Yeti scene is great. You know this guy? Why'd you leave him on my property, man?
Yeah, it was really good stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's everything. That's all 17 episodes so far. I think it's a pretty good list. I think it's pretty strong. Like, I think almost everybody would put the Brazil episode at D because that's just common sense. I get the sense that that first Halloween episode is considered pretty low. And the Mr. Frog episode's at the top. I think most people would agree with that. And yeah, it is one of the best shows on TV I mean, not that I watch a ton of TV, but I don't think there's anything out there that's beating this right now. And with their format, they could do this for a long time, very successfully, I think.
Yes, it's as it was coming out and airing and stuff this month and last month. It has stayed in the top 10 every single day of HBO Max's streaming platform, the most watched stuff, and it spent quite a lot of time at number 1. And considering that Max.com has basically become the most popular streaming site out there, usurping Netflix after everything that's happened with Netflix. It's a really very impressive thing to be able to say.
All right, so I think that'll do it. So I will be posting this video on YouTube in probably a handful of days. So stream's going off. I might stream again later. I might not shure. But thank you for coming out.
Ooh.